There's something that's more important than where in your body you're feeling pain. And on this week's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, it's exactly what we're discussing. We're going to cue our introduction and dive right into this conversation. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Muscle Activation Schaumburg. We're your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
Today, we're discussing this idea of one thing that is more important than where in your body you're experiencing pain. A lot of people say, oh, my shoulder is hurting, so they think they have a shoulder issue, or back, hip, whatever, okay? But there's actually something that's more important than the specific location of the pain, and that's what we want to talk with you about today. We want to let you know that if you want to start taking action on what we're discussing today, that's exactly what we can help you with at our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, where we specialize in muscle activation techniques. So all you need to do to see our availability and get on our schedule is go to our website, www.matschaumburg.com, click the big green button that says Get Started, and you can schedule yourself for your initial MAT consultation and assessment. All right, so often we are fed this belief, this idea, this mindset that where you are having pain, where you are having a symptom, that is where your issue is. And so that's where the focus, the attention, all the effort needs to go when trying to resolve that pain, when trying to resolve that issue. But there's something that we have seen time and time again over the last decade and a half of doing muscle activation techniques that is actually far more telling of where your true underlying issues are than just where the symptom itself is manifesting. And once you can understand this will give you tremendous insight into your own body as far as like what is potentially creating issues, what is keeping you not feeling well, keeping you from getting back to, feeling strong, feeling mobile. And it will actually allow you to better articulate with a trained professional or, somebody that you're going to see about whatever issues you're experiencing and give them better insight aside from like, oh, right here on my shoulder, it hurts. So must be where the issue is. I want you to focus right here. And so we can shift our mindset away from that and towards what we're talking about today. Clients that we work with have a much, much, much higher success rate in terms of not only symptom relief, but actually doing the things in life that they want to do without reoccurrence of the issue.
That's right, Charlie. I know like so many of our clients, before they even realize this, they spend so much time trying to articulate to us like the location of their pain. Like, it's right here, but not over here. It's right under my kneecap on this part of the kneecap. It's over, and there's so much focus on figuring out how can I better tell my MAT practitioner the location of my pain. And honestly, the location of your pain tells us very little. What's really productive for us, though, is knowing what motions and even better, what exercises are creating that pain, right? So here's a really good example from this morning. I had a client trying to explain to me her elbow pain. And, she was spending a lot of time trying to articulate exactly where in her elbow it was bothering her. And I realized that this was costing her a lot of energy. And I said, I don't really care, about exactly where the pain is, but I want to know the motions that are bothering, that create that, sensation. Or, we had just exercised. So I said, actually, I got all the information I need to know because I just watched you do all these lifts and I saw the ones that were bothering it and not bothering it. And so when you switch your frame like that, meaning it does matter that you're uncomfortable, that tells us something isn't working as ideally as it should. But the thing that actually helps us take action to change that experience is knowing what motions created that sensation.
That's exactly right. And when you are experiencing pain in that moment, there may be a lot of motions that recreate that pain, but what is extremely telling is what motion kind of initiated the pain, what activity you were doing that after doing that activity, that's when things got worse. For example, like you may have spent a long weekend, doing a lot of yard work, bending over, weeding or, picking up stuff, carrying bags, whatever. Whatever it was, there was a lot of like, bending over, squatting low, but there was a lot of kind of like rounding, getting into that low position and then coming back up. And then the next day you might wake up and find that your back is really stiff. And you find that when your back is really stiff, like turning is a little bit uncomfortable, like, trying to reach forward is a little bit uncomfortable, even just trying to walk is, all these different things are uncomfortable. And while that's relatively decent information, what is extremely insightful is like, I was doing this activity, and after doing that activity, that's when things really took a turn for the worse. And it's like, oh, okay, after you were, doing a bunch of squats down to the ground to, do weeding, or you were bending over to pick up a lot of stuff. It's like, okay, that's these specific motions in the hip, these specific motions in the trunk. All right, great. I have a great idea of likely what's going to be showing up with your body now in terms of dysfunction within your neuromuscular system. Or another example, we're working with a client. She's like, yeah, it's a little bit, feels kind of stiff when I turn my neck. You might be thinking, okay, there's something going on with your neck. And then talking to her, she's like, yeah, I played a lot of yard games this weekend, one of which was like this bags or, cornhole, whatever you want to call it, the bag tossing game. And is like, oh, okay, so now, there's a lot of motion going on with the shoulder blade, and trying to control all that through your trunk. And what showed up today was, shoulder blade motions and some trunk motion. And it's like, okay, yeah, that cleared up the motion with the neck. But if you're just looking at, it's an issue when I turn my neck, and I'm thinking, okay, it's a neck issue. No, it actually wasn't a neck issue. That was a result of what was going on with the trunk and with the shoulder, which after, again, just kind of probing a little bit and learning more about the activities that kind of initiated things, is like, all right, well, that makes sense based on what you had been doing. So getting that kind of insight is so impactful and so helpful because it gives a very clear idea of what muscles within your body may have gotten stressed and became inhibited as a result of the activity that you were doing.
You're right, Charlie. And when we get this type of insight, rather than just the location of your discomfort or your pain, it helps us create a plan or an idea on what is triggering this issue. So another really good example of this whole situation is yesterday I had a client, and she probably would personally label herself as someone with knee issues because her knees hurt often. It kind of travels around the back of her knee, front of the knee, side of the knee, inside the knee, all the knee stuff. And it always hurts her after she gets off the hip adduction machine. It's like every single time we do hip adduction, the first step off of that thing, she's like, ow, my knees. I have a knee problem. Remember, Julie? And I'm like, yes, but I don't think it's a knee problem. We just need to get to working to your hip adductors. And so every time we work through her hips, her knees feel like worlds of the way better. And when we work through her knees, it's like not that much better. Like a little better, but not that much better. And so by knowing these motions that create the discomfort or create the pain, the motion, or even sometimes I want to say like the force scenario. I know that seems like a tricky thing, but it's almost like not just moving your leg in and out, for example. It's when she squeezes in, right? So it's like the in motion of the hip created the knee issue in this example. That tells us what muscle groups might need a little bit of loving, right? Which muscles do we need to investigate with muscle activation techniques? And it can also even go into these muscle groups might also be deconditioned. So areas that we need to be very sensitive about when we're training, when we're doing conditioning work. And so these, when you address it in this way, instead of just focusing on the pain location, you're looking at what created that pain thing. And when we remove that or we get that area up to speed, it doesn't create that discomfort in whatever area it is anymore. And the system, your system in general, is so much more strong so that you're more resilient to that pain returning in the future.
Exactly. So for you, the big takeaway we want you to leave this conversation with is, if you're feeling something going on in your body, think about when that symptom started and what you were doing kind of in the days leading up to that. And it doesn't even have to be something unusual or out of the ordinary that you were doing. Just think about the activities, and you're like, oh, but I do that all the time. It doesn't matter. Just think about whatever activities you did in the days leading up to it. That will give you tremendous insight into what may be going on with your body from a neuromuscular perspective. And then when you meet with your MAT practitioner, you can relay that information to them and say, okay, these were the activities I was doing the 2 or 3 days leading up. Oh, it's nothing out of the ordinary. It's what I do all the time. It's just going to the grocery store, doing stuff around my house. It was golfing. It was pickleball. It was whatever. It was stuff that you always do, but every single one of those activities has specific motions that you're going through. Or maybe you're like, oh, I wasn't doing anything. I was just, riding in the car for, 3 or 4 hours at a time. It's like, okay, but that puts your body into specific positions that, again, gives us insight as to what may be stressed out. So whatever your day was comprised of leading up to the symptom first starting, that is fantastic insight and fantastic information to relay to your MAT practitioner. And from there, then we're able to assess your body and say, okay, yeah, based on what you're telling us, the activities that you did, what you were experiencing symptomatically, this is what we are seeing objectively from a muscular perspective, from a mechanical perspective. And then let's go see kind of the how well the circuitry is working, how well your brain and muscles are talking to each other, and figure out what muscles are inhibited. And more times than not, when we follow a line of a thought process like this, we see very quick and very profound changes in what somebody is experiencing subjectively from a symptom perspective. We see great improvement in objectively in range of motion, in strength output, and in function overall. And subjectively, we tend to see very quick and very profound changes in what somebody is experiencing symptomatically. And it's not by trying to chase these symptoms, not by trying to, only focus on the area where that symptom is by thinking through things mechanically, but looking back at, the last 2 to 3 days before those symptoms started, and really taking a deep dive into there and figuring out, all right, what activities was your body going through or your body doing that may have stressed it out and created more muscle inhibition than your body could handle at that time. And so that's one of the kind of primary ways that we think about working through somebody's body with muscle activation techniques, especially if they are, an established client and we know that they already have like a really solid foundation, and this is kind of like an interesting flare-up that's going on. It's like, okay, well, what was going on there? And then sometimes, like if people were feeling well overall, and then something just happened, and they're a new client coming in, like, I was totally good, and then I started feeling this thing in my shoulder relatively recently. It's like, okay, cool. What kind of activities were you doing? That can be really helpful information as well. So if you want to start taking action on this, that's exactly what we can help you with at our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, where we specialize in muscle activation techniques. So all you need to do to see our availability and get on our schedule is go to our website, www.matschaumburg.com, click the big green button that says Get Started, and you can schedule yourself for your initial MAT consultation and assessment. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. We always appreciate your eyes on YouTube, your ears on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you consume our content. If you wouldn't mind leaving us a rating and review, it always means the world to us when you do. We're wishing you a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.